So it's not often that I do an episode of this show where I've never met the person before, and they're coming into the show as a guest of someone else, essentially. But the last time I did it, it was with a person who isn't as bodacious as they used to be.
Oh my God! Yes,
but I'm really excited because now I get to sit here and meet someone who I've never met and talked to before, which is Rachel McPadden, who works with Heather all the time. Apparently, Heather's been keeping Rachel from this show and the insights that Rachel could bring. You've been hiding Rachel in the corner, Heather.
I have not been hiding her. We've just been plotting. Okay, like we have been plotting
parallel lines, right?
And I'm so excited because this is Rachel. This is your first time on Culture Cast, and I'm so excited because all the listeners deserve. Well, I don't know if they deserve it, but I hope you guys realize how lucky you are to have because Rachel is a badass. She's a badass writer. She's a badass human. She is an amazing artist. She even can sculpt, which is phenomenal.
God damn. That hype man that is Heather.
I made an abstract piece of art.
About sculpture tonight.
This is a quick aside. I made an abstract piece of art as a kid, and my teacher looked at me and said, "That's the worst ashtray I've ever seen." And I was "It's not an ashtray, motherfucker."
No.
But I'm so excited, and especially because this is a movie. I know Rachel and I, me and you, we have bonded over so many things over the years, but this movie is one of them. And this is a cult movie, dyed in the wool, especially for us Yanks over here, for Americans. And Chris, thank you so much for giving us, for joining us on our journey.
Yeah. So, I was to say, Heather, you just did a better job than I could have. So, Rachel, before we talk about Starstruck from 1982, tell the listeners of the Culture Cast a little bit more about yourself, where people if they want to hear more of the things that you do and say and create, where they can find you as well before we get into the movie.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Rachel McPadden, and I've been a culture writer for about 30 years. I started out in zines. I write mainly about movies and music. I helped produce a couple books and have contributed to movie books and helped produce a couple books that were written by my late husband, Mike McPadden. So Teen Movie Hell and Heavy Metal Movies. Those are books that I worked heavily on and that I'm really proud of and that are great film guides. I'm currently writing a book about a Philly rock star who happened to write I Just Want to Have Fun. And most people don't know that was written by him or by a man. So that's kind of what I'm really engrossed in right now. It's due at the end of the year, my manuscript. So
I like the laugh
all the time.
I like that laugh. It's due at the end of the year.
It's nice to take a break and be able to talk movies with you guys for sure. So, I'm on regular social media. I'm on Instagram. You can find me on there. Twitter still. I don't know why, but I'm not really, while I'm writing a book, I'm not really putting out other stuff. So
that's right.
I like to put the Heather Patreon, I like
oh my God, stop it.
Myself.
Yeah, no, Rachel is phenomenal, and her book is going to be, I'm so fucking excited. And I could say that objectively, because I know the subject, and the musician in question is Robert Hazard, who, I was somebody I was already kind of a fan of, but I didn't know his backstory and history at all. Just hearing the little tiny nugget, I'm just getting little tiny shrapnels, and I'm so excited. And this is why we all do the things we do, like Chris with your show, with our writing and just everything. It's all to explore and celebrate, art and the creatives who are willing to kind of take a step outside the box and do something different. And to make a difference in this crazy ass, beautiful, toxic world we live in. Which I think, and which I think, if anybody's feeling the toxicity of life, I think the movie we're going into is a great kind of remedy, a little balm for it.
I would agree 100%. I would also say, I feel now more than ever, I attempt to be a good steward of the things that I care about and hope to share with other people, and not make them uncomfortable if they watch it and don't like it. They don't have to feel bad in my presence to tell me, oh, I didn't like that. I always feel like that's part of being a good steward of things, is being able to like share things with people, but also understand that some people you share things with aren't going to like it. So, which is a hard thing to swallow for so many people, including the singular 1-star review for this podcast, which is predicated completely on a person not liking my opinion on the Snyder cut and Kong versus Godzilla, which, I mean, fine. If that's the hill you want to die on, be my guest, as they would say in a Disney movie. So yeah, I agree. You know, I'm glad that y'all brought this movie to the Culture Cast. And yeah, on this episode of the Culture Cast, I am still your host, Chris Tashu, much to the chagrin of many. And as you've already heard, I am joined by MondoHeather.com's Heather Drain.
Hello.
And Rachel McPadden, whose qualifications precede her. So there you go.
Hell yeah. Also, are we not talking about the Snyder Cut? I thought that's...
Oh, sorry.
I have seen the Snyder Cut.
Whoa. I mean, you know, I have, and that doesn't make me lesser, I hope.
Which movie was that for?
Justice League.
Oh, yeah.
You're real good. You could watch this movie like 2 or 3 times and still not have seen that. I think that movie's like almost 3.5, 4 hours or something. I don't know. That was a long time ago.
The only long movies we watch, Chris, are Indian cinema, and you know that. That's how
true.
we roll.
It's true.
That's how we roll.
That is very true. However, on this episode of the Culture Cast, we're not talking about Indian cinema. We're talking about 1982's musical comedy, Starstruck.
From the director of My Brilliant Career, a totally new kind of Australian film.
Last night at the Lizard Lounge, Jackie blew the roof off. What with? Hot air? Star quality, Auntie Pearl. Star quality.
My cousin Angus, he's reading this book, Sex Psychology, and he reckons guitars are like phallic symbols, and guitarists masturbate for a living. She got body, she's got soul. I'm gonna part without her. I'm gonna trust her with my future.
Why do you keep singing these pointless bloody songs?
Mom, go throw the blue, just like tango. I just close my eyes and I sing, and I feel like I'm above the crowd.
It's that little something extra.
Starstruck, an Australian musical comedy. Directed by Gillian Armstrong.
The film is directed by Gillian Armstrong, written by Stephen McLean, and stars Joe Kennedy as Jackie, a burgeoning pop star who goes out of her way and tries to do everything she can to become a pop star, a rock star. And her cousin helps her, sort of. Maybe. Ross O'Donovan's Angus, who's definitely not the best part of this movie, I swear. He totally, at least for me, he is. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things in this movie one could say is their favorite thing. I think we'll probably be going around the horn on that. But I am actually going to kick it to whichever one of you wants to answer first as to why we're talking about this movie. Because as you mentioned, Heather, I did not pick this. This is a programming of y'all. So I will. Whichever one of you wants to answer first, be my guest. Why are we talking about 1982 Starstruck?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I feel like I'm playing like the $20,000 pyramid or something. Because Robert Conrad. No, I picked this movie because this is one of my favorite, not just one of my favorite Australian movies, one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite musicals. And it's one that nobody ever really seems to talk about. Like, I don't think I've ever seen, another podcast cover it, at least of recent memory. I haven't seen a ton of like recent, like newer cult writing about it. Like, it seems to be just kind of, to me, like still sort of a somewhat hidden gem. And yeah, I think a lot of the music's fantastic. I think cinematography is so gorgeous. I love the cast, and it also gave me an excuse to bring my sister over here, the lovely Rachel, because it's a movie that she loves, and this is something we always wanted to do. And you being open to the journey, I was like, hey, I got a movie. So, and plus it's like, yeah, more people need to know about this movie because I think it's so much fun.
Yeah, we've been conspiring.
Hey, that's fine.
Yeah, the world is in the best kind of danger it doesn't know about just yet.
The pieces are moving.
My question though, is that, of course, Chris, this is your first exposure to the movie. I got this movie. I feel like I almost like did a blind buy when it got released on Blue Underground when they did their DVD back in, let's say like 04, 05. Yeah. It was like around 04. And cause that's the kind of nerd I am. I just was like, I need this. And I watched it and I was like, I was right. Right. But like, Rachel, what was your entrance to this movie?
Okay, so it was a movie that I first saw on cable, but it wasn't like, and this was as a kid. This would have been the early to mid, probably early 80s. Not, I would say maybe a couple of years after it came out. And I can't remember if it was like Night Flight or if it was something like that. It seems like it because they would always have the music themed film. Mm-hmm. And this was more, like if they had some kind of like punk theater or whatever. This is really, oh, here, puppy.
Yeah, Brody Lee also has a history with this baby.
But so once and like really forgot about it because I think a lot of those movies I was young and they were kind of like they were just like impressionistic, It's like I liked what subculture and kind of music that it was exposing me to, but I didn't remember tons of details. And then I actually in 1993 I saw the soundtrack in a used record store in St. Louis. And it was a record exchange they had a couple locations. I would be there all the time. And I used to buy soundtracks, just even movies that I hadn't seen. But because they'd be inexpensive, they weren't super, super popular. And I would go buy what the album cover looked like and the names of the songs and things like that, But so I would always look in the soundtrack section and I found a copy of Starstruck on vinyl.
Oh my God.
I mean,
holy shit.
And it still has the sticker on it, record exchange $6. So I bought it for $6 and I was like, I know that I've seen that movie, but then for another, 10 or so years, I couldn't remember. It was just like the photos, the music from the movie and then the photos on the record were pretty much all that I could remember. I didn't remember much about it. So it was wild to have this. Like it's such a soundtrack. I don't think it stands alone on its own as like, oh, this is my favorite record. It definitely has the feeling of musical.
Right.
But lesser so, new wave musical, which is a weird concept, at that point for me. And then it was, I want to say that they showed it on like the TCM or something, like it is as a 2 a.m. movie, probably like 2008 or something. And I was like, oh my God, that's that movie. Because then I knew the soundtrack so well. And I was like, putting it together. And so I got to watch it in the middle of the night in more modern times. Probably, probably the best version I had ever seen of it, I imagine. And it was probably after the release that you're talking about, Heather, like in some time they were able to play. Because I know they've done a different Blu-ray since. And I think there's like commentaries and stuff. I mean, I have a Blu-ray now. I don't think I've watched any of the extras or anything, but, and as a teenager who grew up with, like Molly Ringwald movies and that kind of, like to me, it offered like around the same time to even be exposed to it the first time. It seemed like right when you're getting into like, which is reflective of my book. She's like somewhere between Molly Ringwald and Cyndi Lauper. She was kind of this like much more accessible teen idol kind of a character. It's like she was she was so weird and didn't care about being weird. Whereas, Molly Ringwald, she's so easily switched over to play the rich girl that you never really bought that she was this kind of like weirdo. You're out, the outcast or whatever.
Right.
So,
wait, y'all too?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like so many of those John Hughes movies just ring so hollow because it's like she's just not believable as that kind of character.
Right. And I was living in the Chicago suburbs and was like a young teenager when those movies came out. They were for me and I knew those kids, and some of them actually feel more real when you grew up in that environment than you would think.
Sure.
But still, it's like that doesn't necessarily make it worthy of being a film, But yeah, it was just so, and I think Heather and I kind of talked about that early on too. It's like, it may not be, I don't even think it was marketed as a teen movie. I know when the brief time that they marketed it in the US, they kept trying to make people understand it wasn't a teen movie, which I see it as kind of an ideal teen movie.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, our two protagonists, Jackie's 18.
Yeah.
And Angus is 14. I mean, that doesn't get much more teen. I mean, and that explains some of like the decision making because both of them sometimes they do and say things where as an older adult now, you're kind of like, man, you're a little bit of a shit, but they're still likable. And it's like, well, yeah, when you're a kid, like even the best kid is going to have like a few little like shitter kid moments. Like that's just part of growing. It's part of growing up. Oh my God. The soundtrack, for people, when I got all excited and Chris went, whoa, Rachel, to explain the visual, she's showing us the physical vinyl soundtrack that she bought, which looks like it's an amazing. You've taken exquisite care of that. So beautiful. You need to put that on Instagram. Like, because oh my God, it's gorgeous. Oh
man,
man,
it's like an immaculate shape. Wow.
Oh, and the inner sleeve is even glossy, and it's got this cool sort of negative, like reverse image of Joe Kennedy, the Starstruck. That is nice, man.
Can we talk a minute about the music, or is that getting ahead of ourselves? Just in general, like I was going to say, the thing that's cool to me too is when I got the soundtrack, the song "Body and Soul," which is "She Got Body, She Got Soul" as a Split Enz song, and it was written by Tim Finn, who was in Split Enz and would later go on with Neil Finn to form Crowded House. So these were also Australian musicians that I knew Split Enz, and listening to that again and realizing, oh my gosh, Body and Soul is a Split Enz song, and then looking at the soundtrack and seeing that Phil Judd wrote, he was in Swingers at the time, and like he wrote half of those songs on the soundtrack. So these were like, guys from Split Enz and also from several, that went on to play in other Australian popular bands that might not have broken out to the US, but it's pretty awesome that that's what the soundtrack is those guys.
Oh, completely. Yeah. And that was one of the things that hooked me with the movie is that I have such a love-hate relationship with musicals because I'm such a music fiend so for me, like for musical to work, it's like I have to like the music. And I'm not the biggest fan of more traditional musicals. And because like, I'm like, well, that's the music I'm not really going to listen to, And when I saw this movie, I was like, and the Swingers, oh my God, it's such an underrated band, by the way, for anybody who's wanting to go into some deep dive onto more underrated New Zealand, Australian, early 80s music, as you all should. Of course you should. Like, Phil Judd has such a great presence in this movie too, because even though he's not really a character per se, and in fact, I think they renamed the band the Mainliners in the actual movie.
Yeah.
That shot of him, like when they're in the Lizard Lounge near the beginning of the movie, where Angus has gotten Jackie a gig playing at this little super stylized club. Like I kind of wish real life was lit like this movie. Like,
yeah. The art direction just rules.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. But that shot of his face as that red light on it right before he launches into One Good Reason, is just, it's so iconic for me that I had forgotten this till recently. I edited and made my own cable access show years ago. And I used parts of this movie in my intro and outro, like at the little intro outro montage. And that shot of Phil Judd is in there. Like it's that. There's the sharks from Tough, which I know we'll get to later. Which, oh God, I love that. I love that so much. There's so many things I love in this movie. I could just like go into right now. And that's the thing. This film is like a really good mix of being very modern and sort of almost postmodern with some of the set design and art design and the new wave music. But it also has that the core story is so classic, kind of like Hollywood, sort of like Andy Hardy meets Star is Born a little bit. But it works for it. Like, I don't think it works against it.
I like the musicals that I like, and that tends to not be like the usual stuff, which is fine. I mean, the usual things aren't bad. I mean, it's just I don't go out of my way to watch things like Rent or Les Miserables, which Les Miserables is something we're covering next year. So like, I say I'm not covering it, but we're covering it eventually next year in January. But like, I tend to gravitate towards the things that are less mainstream, less kind of constantly being referenced and redone. I mean, there was a time where Rocky Horror wasn't the thing that it is now, where it's been redone, actually, which I kind of always forget is a thing that has happened in the reality we live in. So I tend to like the things that are less popular, not because I'm trying to be that guy, but because they tend to resonate with me more. And I can say that I enjoyed this a lot, for the reasons that y'all are already kind of getting into, which is it is so much its own thing. I can 100% understand why this movie had a hard time finding its audience in the States, because I can see why. I don't agree with why that would be the case. But this is a hard movie to sell, because I don't think it is a teen movie, but like the message is so universal that for it to be a teen movie is like, well, I think you kind of put it in a little bit of a box, and some people may just be apprehensive to get near that box because it's a teen movie. But I think, to both of y'all's points, like what it's trying to do is more important, which is tell kind of that universal story of wanting to do this thing that is so hard to be successful at, and somehow, some way, by hook or by crook, doing. And there are so many things that have to fall into place, that have to exist in this movie for our characters to get there. But it does happen against the odds of all of the odds, because this is, I don't know how to explain this other than like becoming the most successful musician possible is fucking impossible.
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just is.
Right.
Like, there's only so much room at the top, and that spot at the top is being fought over forever. Like, and relevancy is only minutes long, seconds, really. Like, you know, the most relevant bands of all time got part lucky, part skill, part God knows what else. Like, the fact that a week and a half ago, the Beatles are releasing a brand new song, and like it doesn't move the needle more or less at all for anybody is a testament to like, if relevancy really isn't something that people can even like measure anymore. Because there's a time and a place where that happening would have been a thing that everybody would have gone ape shit about. But that's not the case anymore. And it's like Starstruck, the movie and the message are like, it's almost even hard to comprehend doing that thing now, because this thing that she does in this movie, this isn't even the way you do it anymore. It's even more nebulous to be successful as a musician, because there are so many paths now. It's not just the one path that you, again, because the way she becomes successful is kind of a little bit more traditional than I even thought it was going to be. But at the same time, like, there are so many people now that have become successful through TikTok. And it's like, what? Wait, like what? Like, okay, like now you're a musician and you're a TikTok musician. Like, that's a thing. Like, okay, sure. I'm glad that the path has been democratized, but at the same time, there's a lot of bad stuff that's come out of that. Like a lot of really not subpar music, but it's like this, I don't even know what you would call this. Like it's okay.
Well, speaking of music, I kind of wonder if part of what hurt this film with like getting over to the US too is I feel like, and I may be forgetting a really obvious title, so either one of you, please feel free to be like, hey, but I feel like a lot of the movies that have music that either had like new wave or punk elements, the best they ever did was being big cult successes and never were like huge breakthroughs. Cause it's like, ladies and gentlemen, the Fabulous Stains, huge fan of, that bombed. That didn't do well at all. Shock Treatment failed. And that's another favorite of mine.
To be fair, Shock Treatment also failed because it's not Rocky Horror. Like,
Well, it also, the US trailer for it is dog shit. Like they did not know how to promote that movie. The studio kind of fucked the pooch a little bit on that one too. But also, I think the movie was just too. I'll say that. We should do
I
can't help it.
I would love to redo those. I would love to redo Shock Treatment. Like what is there to say about Rocky Horror? Like that everybody else hasn't already said a billion times, but Shock Treatment on the other.
I'm so passionate.
But the problem really is like it is related to and it is a sequel to one of the most influential movies of all time, like Rocky Horror. Like I don't know, like it stands alone. Like it's I don't know. That's an uphill cliff face immediately. You know what I mean?
Right. That didn't help. But it also, a lot of the music has a lot more new wave elements where the soundtrack to the original one is kind of a cross between like old school rock and roll, a little bit of glam rock, a little bit of, traditional. Yeah. There was rock and roll. Was that Rock and Roll Hotel, which I don't know how big of a release that got with Rachel Sweet, which somebody please release this so I can fucking see this. Because I've been trying to see it for years. It was shelved. It has had a screening. Oh my God. That is awesome. Our Rachel has a Rachel Sweet pin. That rules. I love Rachel Sweet. And I love Rachel McFadden. See? And I know there are others. Erga Music War, which we will be talking about. We'll be recording that episode in December.
Very soon. I was about to say, I recognize that name.
Yes. So I kind of feel like the musicals are movies that were branded very heavily as kind of musical adjacent that were huge successes in the US were in the 80s were movies almost more like soundtrack, kind of like Footloose and Flashdance. And, I don't even know, like it was just a weird period of time, I think, for musicals at that point. Like after Grease, I'm not sure. Streets of Fire was another movie that should have been bigger. That had a really great, and actually had more of a rock soundtrack, but
Forbidden Zone.
Forbidden Zone's its all other, that movie was made to be a cult movie. Yeah. Forbidden Zone is its own. And I love Forbidden Zone, but it's its own weird baby.
There is.
And the Cruisers, which is also another.
And the dog side.
And I had read something in relation to that, them trying to kind of release this movie in the US, which had a decent amount of success in New York and a small run in LA, and then kind of in the suburbs for a minute. But it really gained popularity in cable. But at the time, their argument versus it, like wanting it to be more of an adult film, is they were using Grease versus Saturday Night Fever as the example, where Grease would be for kids, Saturday Night Fever was for adults, and so it's like, what type of film is it? It's so funny because it's literally neither. It's not. I don't see it as the audience for either. I mean, it is. I also don't see it as a mainstream movie. And it was kind of, what else was going on at that time? It was probably like some of those early horror films. I mean, there were definitely lots of teen movies that were so much more over the top. It didn't have, I just think there was a different attitude about musicals too. It's so strange. I mean, that's obviously why it caught my attention, probably why it caught your attention, Heather, is that why is it a musical? I mean, other than that she's pursuing that, like, there's plenty of movies that have bands in the background as part of the story, whether it's a real or made up band that's a part of the movie and it'll have original music or whatever. But this being where you just break out into song and you're doing like walking a tight in the pub that you work at or whatever, like it is so strange. But something about that is like really satisfying as a, like alternative culture, like as a subculture to just be like, oh, they're just going to sing, just going to sing us through this. She's breaking into another song. She's going to have everybody start dancing.
Oh my God.
Turn it into like half a Busby Berkeley number right now,
Oh, it's so good.
Full tribute kind of to lots of different types of musicals. And I will say, I'm a huge fan of the movie Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which is song. All of everything is sung. There's nothing is spoken. It's all sung. And it is, I'm surprised it's as popular as it is, except for it's incredibly beautiful. And the art direction of that is like maybe the best of all time, where, Catherine Deneuve walks into a room, she matches the room, she'll walk into the next room, taking her coat off, and her clothes underneath will match the room that she's walked into. I mean, it's just like a visual wonderment. And then it also happens to be a musical and all in French. So it's completely bizarre, but I feel like because of my experience with something like that, and that being so satisfying and like not even a narrative way necessarily, but just all these elements to get your attention. I think I'm more open to a film like Starstruck.
Yeah. Oh, same. I think it's kind of movies like this, and I would say even on a bigger level, cult movies, I think also tap into this innate kind of, I think, quest a lot of us have to see something a little different. You know, it's like you get tired. To me, I always liken it to food analogies. Like, you know, you get tired of eating the same thing all the time. It's good to shake it up. And I think there's such a blandification with cinema, especially in America and especially mainstream cinema, that, you know, seeing something, you know, like Starstruck, it's definitely, you know, it's unusual. It's especially because it's unusual enough to where the traditional like things about it make those stand out even more in a way. Cause they're like Chris, you said you were surprised, like the climax ends up being even more kind of old fashioned than you expected. And it is, but I kind of love that. It's such a neat contrast to sort of all the very sort of like post-punk sort of like, I hate saying new wave, but I mean it new wave in a positive. I'm not using it as the, you know, the cynical sort of industry term that was, you know, created back then. But
I love new wave. I'm not going to any definition of new wave is fine by me. I'm not going to argue.
I have very mixed feelings on new wave stuff. I guess I've literally never talked about it. And so this is weird. I mean, Heather, you know what I'm going to mention, and this will come as a surprise to you, Rachel McPadden, and everybody else, essentially. I actually spent a year and a half working on the podcast that's airing right now, Peter and the Acid King, all about Peter Ivers and his time on New Wave Theater and his murder. I was actually, and I'm actually an associate producer on that podcast.
Wow.
And that's all I can say. And that's all I will say. And if you want to go check it out and listen to it, it is completely different than the show that I worked on. It is now hosted by Penelope Spheris, and Alan Sachs makes a couple little forays into it. But at the time, he was narrating the show in its entirety. So I had very weird feelings on New Wave, just to put it mildly. I don't know how I feel about New Wave even now. Or any of like those topics. So just throwing that out there if anybody's interested.
Man, I did know that. It's cool to hear it publicly. It's crazy. And yeah, now new wave is a term. Now, growing up for me, and as a teenager in my 20s, new wave just usually meant, oh man, this is going to be something I'm going to be into. Because it basically was a positive connotation for anything that was basically different. It's not quite pop music. It's not like hard rock, though I love both and I always have. Yeah, it's post-punk. New wave is post-punk. It's kind of like the, you know, it's a sort of the logical offspring of the original punk movement. Where one can get mixed feelings about, and I totally get it, especially the more I've read over the years about the industry, and is that a lot of musicians, especially at the time, kind of hated it, and some music writers, I know Lester Bangs was one of them, that because it felt like there were like very cynical, like record company press people that were basically like, well, punk doesn't make money. We'll call it new wave. And, you know, we'll say, you know, but I hate it though, because even when some musicians, they'll mention other musicians that I like as seeing derogatory, like, oh, Nick Lowe. And I'm like, well, wait, what's wrong with Nick Lowe? Like, I love Nick Lowe. I know Nick Lowe's amazing. So, you know what? Yeah, it's at the end of the day, music's like anything else. Is it good? Is it interesting? Is it made with somebody who's excited to do it? Are you excited to hear it? And that's also what matters. Genre labels can get, all of them are fucking ridiculous if you really break them down. I mean, you want to go into heavy metal or electronic music? I once had a guy argue with me about, well, that's not quite black metal. It's more like this kind of black metal. And it's like, dude, like, you know, are we going to break out the 8-sided dice to roll on what genre? Like something?
Yes, we are, apparently.
I mean, I guess I'll stay more specifically. Yeah, exactly. And more specifically on the topic of new wave, since I am older than you guys, that was contemporary when I was very young, and it was with my pop, you know?
Right.
So when I was, you know, young grade school, that was most of the music that I was exposed to, but also something that part of the deep research of doing the book that I'm working on right now is the Philly scene at that time in the late 70s, early 80s it's interesting to see because there's different categories. New wave was like the new wave of rock, some of it was synthesizer based. Some of it was definitely more just straightforward rock that had, some of it was power pop. Some of it was really experimental bands that were more arty, that were kind of less accessible. It really was an umbrella. So I think it gets narrowly defined as time goes by, but really it was actually like a huge range of music was ended up under that umbrella, maybe unfairly, but everyone probably has an example of it that they don't like. But I think I was, I was like 8 or 9 years old, it's like I loved almost everything that I was hearing. So, but it is interesting because when I was speaking to people that were in bands at that time too, they were saying like, well, there's kind of the different factions. They were like, it was split into kind of 3 categories, even though they were all kind of considered new wave. They wouldn't have necessarily called themselves that, but that's just how it panned out at that time. So,
oh, that's an excellent point. No, I love that, especially because I mean, a lot of people now probably don't know this or couldn't remember because they weren't. But I mean, I remember. I'm old enough to remember the delineation where it's like, say, Susie and the Banshees. Like that's a band that some people would have put in the new wave. Same with The Cure. Now people are like, oh, that's goth rock or dark wave. And it's like, but back then people didn't really use the term goth like that with music. And then you had like, oh, this is college rock. Did I remember the college rock? We're like, oh, this is college radio rock. Like I remember.
Yeah. Hell yeah. That was my jam.
It was like, which is like indie rock, essentially.
Exactly. It's indie rock. And then it's like, oh, wait.
And college radio. So it was college rock.
Right. And then I remember being disappointed because then like I would actually listen to a local college rock radio. And I'm like, and I didn't realize it was in PR because I'm like, well, I like classical music, but are they going to play any REM? But fresh air, but and then it becomes alternative. So, but yeah, this is, and that's the thing is that like with the music of Starstruck, it is kind of, and this all beautifully ties together because like with with the Swingers and you've got like Tim Finn, you have like that sort of like power pop kind of at times. There's some good, like a little bit of crunchiness. I always felt like the Swingers sound a little more crunchy than say Split Ends and later on Crowded House. But, but obviously adjacent. There's one band towards the end where they're doing the New Year's Eve gig. I don't know what that band is, but they're total power pop. And they're so good. I'm like, I need to do deeper research to figure out who they are because I'm like, man, I like that song. Mental as Anything, which was an Australian band. That's the thing is Australia in the 80s had such a amazing and fascinating cultural zeitgeist going on with both music and cinema.
Yes. Aussie cinema is wild. That's my like reference point here coming into this movie was a couple Mike White marches ago. Mike picked Aussie movie, and some of the stuff that we watched, I was like, why have I not seen more of this? And I think we said at the time, like, you could do a whole show just on Australian movies. Like, and
absolutely,
we didn't, obviously. I ended up doing the Bollywood thing instead, but like, I think still stands like, I don't know, the common moviegoer who watches Western cinema, specifically American cinema, is not going to go, oh yeah, an Australian musical. They're just, I don't know, it's just weird. Like, and it's still a thing, like having to overcome this stupid definition of international cinema not being fun. Like foreign cinema just is expected to be serious. And I mean, it is like, there's plenty of movies that have a message and they're trying to say something. They have something to say. And I'm not saying this movie doesn't, but I think there's this weird expectation. I mean, we fight it constantly with the Indian movies. Like Indian action movies are fucking awesome. Like there's Indian action movies. Like, yes, because people in India want to watch movies where there's action and they don't necessarily want it to be Will Smith and Arnold Schwarzenegger. They have actors of their own there. It's like, I don't know why I'm having to explain this to you at Arby's while I'm ordering my sandwich, but yet I am doing it. Like, but it's that thing. It's like, it's same with this movie. It's that same idea of like, I shouldn't have to tell you that there's Australian musicals, but yet here we are. Like, this movie should have just easily slotted into so many other things that were coming out in this country in the 80s. And yet it being Australian seems to have been part of like the problem of selling it. Cause it's like, well, it's already not a thing that's like recognizable for people here. And it's like, why should that matter? Why should any of that matter? Because again, people here only want to see people. I don't even know. I wonder if it's people don't want to watch movies with subtitles, or if it's even stupider than that. They don't want to watch movies with people they don't recognize.
Both. Yeah. I mean, now they're more inclined because we all put subtitles on everything and we're reading every show,
I can't hear my movie without it.
Exactly. So, I think it's a little bit different now, but I think there probably were a few decades there where that was definitely, it became more niche just because it's more of a challenge to watch it in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
now this is on Tube.
It's for me on YouTube, actually, too. I mean, it's maybe not the best, but it's complete. And so that's pretty beautiful. But you can just see it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, too, I think that trying to figure out, I think there is a lack of Puritanism in this film that you get in American films where you either have to make it really dirty or really clean. They want to know, it's like American teen films or even kind of coming of age films or whatever. It's like they need a more, something more delineated where she's like very free sexually. She doesn't, it's not even introduced as anything that would be a hang up. Sexual or, homosexuality is just like handled very smoothly. Is kind of, there's a lot of things that I feel like are just kind of smoothly walked through that wouldn't have been so smoothly walked through. They would have had to be big punchlines, or they would have avoided some of it completely, because American films want to tell you like, well, is she good or is she bad?
Right.
God.
It's like they would have had to say like showing people judging her for what she, some of the things that happen instead of like her being able to just really breeze through her life. Like we're breezing through her life with her. And right off the bat, I love that it jumps you in. They don't need to explain to you what her process is. She's jumping in just being like, okay, well, I want to try and get this. And then here's Angus is like, oh, all you have to do, like he's basically talking about manifestation right off the bat,
right.
Where he's like, oh, if you want a Volkswagen, if you want a Volkswagen, think about a Volkswagen, you'll get one. If you want a Jag, think about a Jag, you'll get one. She's like, I don't want either of those. I want this. And it's like the kangaroo costume.
Oh my God.
And then they're immediately kind of into like they're both, he is her little mini manager and she's so naturally, I think there's also people in life that's how you get stars, is there's some people who are just like, they know they're going to get out. They don't feel they're, it's like she's bigger. She doesn't have to say like, that could be stuck in this place. It's like, I think she probably does say that calmly a few different times in the movie, but it's like, she is just propelled forward by her own ambition, and she's letting everyone else catch up to her. And if they can't, too bad. Like they're always on to the next thing. And some of these publicity stunts, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts in the movie where she's hanging up the building in like the weird, like a soft sculptural nude suit. It's like really incredible. Like the costume designer is outrageous in this whole thing. And some of the casual outfits she wears, I still dress. They still made a bigger impression on me than some of, that American youth culture or new wave or punk culture. It's like, I really like her style. I still have her hair color. I feel like her wearing tiaras and stuff. I was kind of doing that from the time I was a kid. It's like, it's really accessible, fun type of personality. And since they do present her in such a regular way, it's like, she almost is like this manic pixie dream girl, except it's a quirky character, where in American films too, I feel like they almost have to be tragic character. These punk and new wave characters are more tragic. They're not as light, it's like Valley Girl. The Valley Girls are, they're like the good people and the punks are the bad people, It's like they don't have to make this definition. She's just herself. She just has this incredibly unique style and she's just weird and she's allowed to just be that.
They don't hang a lantern on it. They don't have, it's just, we open with her and she is who she is already. And the journey that she's going on is to become who she is, but successful, not becoming anybody else. And like, that would not have been the story if this had been made in the States. It would have been a transformative journey, a girl from the streets, from the other side of town. It's like, fuck that. I don't care. Like, people who come from the other side of the town don't necessarily focus on the fucking fact that they're from the other side of the town the entire time, because then you're just sad and boring. Like, that's I watched 8 Mile recently, and that movie is so like Eminem, first off. I like him as an artist. As an actor, there leaves a lot to be desired in terms of natural delivery. But when I watched 8 Mile, it was like, it's so sad. It's so sad all the time. And it's like, but this guy had to have known he was going to bust enough balls to get out of there. And I don't think he was just sad all the time about it. Like there was anger and frustration that motivated him to do better and want better. And I just never got the sense of that. And in this movie, I get the sense that like she's frustrated with where she is. She wants to do more and she does more and she has to enjoy doing that more because that's part of what makes her successful is that infection, the infectiveness of her positivity and just wanting to be herself and do what she wants. It comes through. And like that is something that if this movie had been made in the States, it would have lacked because like you said, Rachel, there's no room for fun. It's got these weird people are sad. Like the weird people are fun. They don't have to be sad.
Yeah.
And if they are sad, they're not constantly talking about how fucking sad they are either. Like, because if they were, they would be kind of a drag. Like,
well, that's one of the things one of the main things Hollywood tends to get wrong is just like if they try to even focus and especially, anybody who's grown up actually in the Midwest or the South, few things will make you just want to start crying tears of blood is seeing a Hollywood movie show like quote unquote working class or lower class families and people from these regions. And it's just like, it's either the most offensive stereotype and combined with just like everybody's depressed. And it's like, well, I guess if you're not upper middle class, you might as well just kill yourself is the message we're getting. Like it's such bullshit. And Rachel, I love your point so much because you're right. If this had been made in the States, Angus would have been made a total perv. In the early 80s, they would have had him trying to check out boobs.
Stealing panties.
They would have made him like the Anthony Michael Hall 16 Candles proxy kind of character. I feel like if this was American, thank God it's not.
So disappointed that it wasn't, aren't you?
I love Australians.
And
so
even
much.
their friendship as cousins, they're almost like brother and sister, they're best friends. It's a really unique relationship that they show between them because there is 14 and 18, especially with the boy being the younger age. It's not likely friendship, and he has that same kind of ambition that she does. It's like, that's why they recognize something in each other and they've kind of brought it out in each other too. So it's really cool that they have each other because if you're going to be that weirdo in town, it's super convenient if your cousin can be your sidekick.
Yeah. And I love all the characters like that are part of sort of like the tableau of basically they all live in this like sort of like bed, this little like tavern that's also like a bed and breakfast. And it is a
diner. That's one of the weirdest things for me. It just looks like a diner. So they keep referring to it as a tavern or acting like it's a bar. And I'm like, it's lit like a diner, like a daytime diner. It's really hard that's something as an American, it's hard for me to wrap around, but it's cool. Like even in an interview, it's like they're referring to her as a barmaid. She didn't know how to be a barmaid. I was like, is she not just a diner waitress? Like I don't fight. It's a weird thing. It's cool. I accept it as an Australianism.
I think it's the way that it's also set up, like the design of the place. It's just that like immediately walking in and there being that counter, that like hip waist counter. Like I thought it was a diner as well. Like I was like, oh, look at this weird diner that all these weird Australian. You know what? We haven't really mentioned it. Like, well, we've mentioned how much we love Australian cinema, but after watching something with Australian accents long enough, I start reading it in their accent because for whatever reason, like the Australian accent is just one that like I'm fascinated by because it's so unique. Nah, like all that, like the way that they say just like the most casual words. I love it because it's just, I don't know, like after watching these things for a while, like over and over again, like so much of the Australianisms, just their language and their grasp of the English language is so unique. And I love I really love the accents so much. And they're all sporting them. They all have those very heavy Australian accents. And I love it.
I have a high school or a teenage confession that I feel like is related to that. So I was accepted into a study abroad or like exchange student study abroad for my freshman year of high school that would have been in Australia. And and it was like, it was the most exciting thing that was happening in my life. And I had a meeting with the high school, with the I think like a guidance counselor at the high school that I would be returning to. So the high school that the one I ended up going to, but in advance to kind of like discuss what the issue would be if I returned from my first year in Australia, blah, blah, blah. And they basically told me that none of the credits would transfer and that I would have to do 5 years of high school. And I was like inconsolable. And I didn't do the study abroad. Because at that point, I actually ended up graduating high school a semester early. That's how much I didn't want to do high school, So the idea of 5 years of high school, and I was like a good student, and it felt like punishment. And now I was like, I wish if I would have gone to Australia, I probably would not have come back.
Yeah.
I just would have figured out how to run away at age 15 or whatever and stay down there. But so yeah, I feel like I've watched modern Australian reality TV and soap operas, like 7 seasons of of Australian soap operas and things like this. So I hear you. I'm way into it. I love it. I kind of can't believe that I've not been.
The Australian version of The Traitors is the better version of The Traitors. If you have seen that show, it is like a televised version of Werewolf or Mafia or any of those social deduction games. But the Australian version, they take it deathly serious because it is normal people trying to compete for money as opposed to celebrities. And the depths to which they backstab and fuck one another over makes even me queasy. So it's all on Peacock. But there are 3 different versions. There's the American version, which features, of course, D-list celebrities because that is, chum in the water for so many people in the States. And then the British one, I think the British one has like a mix, but the Australian one is just normal people competing for like $100,000. And it's, just the Australian mindset is, I don't know, like they're a different people. And I'm with you, Rachel. Like I have been to Australia, but it was so long ago. I was like 12. So it's like, I'm sure I went to Australia. Right. Like I'm sure you did. So I don't know, like I'm lucky to have been, but it's not like I remember. So I would love to go back because I am enthralled with their cinema and definitely their like take on things and their attitude as a people, I think is one that like Americans obviously really resonate with. That like do it your fucking self attitude is definitely like shared between our country and Australia, but just the Australian sentiment, I love it. It's just very like go fuck yourself. Like, I don't know. They take no shit is the way I perceive a lot of Australia. They just don't fucking take any shit from anybody.
Well, Australia's history is very similar to the American South because, a lot of the, European, people that were they're basically like the people that the other countries didn't want. It's like religious zealots and criminals. And that's the same with the South. That's the American South was basically, which explains so much about me
sure does.
And my family.
Not you, the South in general.
I've seen you haven't been to a Korean family reunion, but there is like, and especially this period of time, part of that, and I will admit, this is something I need to, and I will research more for like a future project, but in the 80s, there was like something mandated by the government to basically encourage and foster Australian cinema, like made by Australian, like a pure cinema. And there was a shift where that went away in the late 80s. And that's basically why you start seeing a lot less Australian cinema. And actually, my friend Morris from Love That Album podcast, and Morris is a sweetheart, and he's Australian, and he was able to explain some of this to me the last time we talked. But he was just saying like a lot of people like that he know would be like they're like, oh, Australian films are terrible. Like I'd rather go see a Hollywood movie, and that was like so depressing and heartbreaking to me. And I just like I need more reason to bitch about Hollywood already. But I think that's one of the kind of the more sort of like unpleasant and queasy things about American culture and cinema is just how it's been promoted and pimped out so much to other countries that, you end up having people putting it like because it's shinier or whatever as a bar above something that's local and homegrown. And I think that's terrible. I think I think every country, like if I had my druthers, every country, every region, like including the States, like imagine if every region of an area basically not only encouraged, but made it to where, hey, you're an independent filmmaker. Cool. Here's a small grant, nothing crazy, make some art, And
Canada's had a really beautiful system of that, which is why so many movies got filmed in Canada in that same time period. And that may have been in Australia. It was like a similar type of system. But so you get this wave of, films that are financially backed in a way that they hadn't been. And then it gets taken away. But we're lucky to have what was produced during that time.
Oh, hell yeah. And there's still a few there's still a few that definitely have like that great, like independent spirit that are always going to make films. And some, like there's a filmmaker I've become a fan of recently named Hayden Keenan, who made the incredible, and this is the most undiscovered gem, because I actually have Australian friends who've never even heard of this movie. Came out in 1987 called Pandemonium, also musical, also an Australian musical, and starring David Argue, who most people are probably familiar with as being, and he's like one of the villains of BMX Bandits.
Nicole Kidman's first movie.
Yeah, he is in, I think, Gallipoli. He's in, Midnight Spares, which just got a really beautiful Blu-ray release with an essay by yours truly. Pimp.
Crazy. He's in Razorback.
Yeah, David Argue is fucking phenomenal. And he's on Facebook. So friend, if you can friend him and let him know that, because he's amazing. He's a sweetheart. But he is, oh my God, this guy is a treasure. He's like, but Pandemonium, like, just on a sidetrack, he plays a documentarian who falls in love with a dingo girl who also could be the second coming of Christ. And there's musical numbers, there's Satanists, there's lesbian incestuous Nazis. There's a member of Men at Work plays a magician. Actually, my second favorite member, it's Greg Ham, the saxophonist. Because I'm a Colin Hay fan girl for life.
Same.
But Greg Ham, R.I.P. He's playing like a New Yorker magician. He's a kid, like he's talking like that. Is, oh my God, this movie. We'll save that for later. But
we'll save it for when we cover it in the future.
Yes. But Hayden Keenan is still around. And this is a guy that started as a student filmmaker.
We should do a Hayden Keenan retrospect.
We should. I want to get more of his company, Smart Street Films, is still around. I want to get more of his films. It's kind of pricey just because like Australia also has changed something to where if you mail a DVD or a Blu-ray, it's considered a big package. So shipping is
so expensive.
Oh my God. I mean, everything's more expensive nowadays, but it's bad when the person you're buying from apologizes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
He felt like, and I didn't even realize that I was ordering it for the director. That's how I got Pandemonium. Because I just became obsessed with it after seeing the trailer. And yeah, he was like, sent the sweetest email. He's like, I am so sorry. It's stupid. Not the film, but just the shipping.
Right. The shipping being like 4 times as much as the item itself or something. Oh my God. But yeah, Hayden's still around and still kicking ass and representing. But, and actually with directors, I mean, this is Gillian Armstrong, who, of that breed, definitely got a lot of acclaim over here. I think it's like basically when you think of like Australian directors that got like, that kind of made that crossover and got that notice. It was like her, Jane Campion,
George Miller.
I
mean, like George Miller's the big one now that I think like most like mainstream people would know just based on, Mad Max and Happy Feet also.
Oh God, I always forget that.
Right. Happy Feet 1 and Happy Feet 2, actually, which is even fucking nuttier. Like, yeah.
Oh my God. It's Babe Spence. And
Babe and Babe 2 at least, I believe.
Holy shit.
Yeah, Babe 2 Pig in the City is a wild.
I do love really George Miller. Oh my God. But I love like because with and I haven't seen a ton of Gillian's movies, like True Confession.
Yeah, me either.
But I love that she did this film, because you look at some of the other films, and particular, I'm trying to like the big one that she is known for, Gillian Armstrong. Why am I blanking on this? My Brilliant Career with Judy Davis. Oh, good. She did Little Women.
Yeah, she did that 93, or was it 93, 94? That
Yeah.
Little Women. And she did the Mrs. Soapole. I don't even know if that's how you say it. Soapole.
That's always how I said it. Yeah. And
Gibson, Diane Keaton.
so just even, you can even just look at the poster art.
Yeah, 94. But Winona Ryder, Little Women, she did that one.
Oh God. This woman who did all this did Starstruck. This like bright pink, glittery, shimmery, neon red kangaroo. I love the red kangaroo costume. A musical I just find even more fascinating. Like, cause this isn't, I don't know, it'd be like finding out that Jane Campion was actually the director of Rock and Roll Hotel. Which I'm saying, but like it's so kind of bizarre. But I know they got her on the Blue Underground. The release I have does have extras, and they got both her and Stephen McLean, the writer. And she sounded, I love that because it's one of those things she clearly still had a lot of love for it, and talked about that one shot. It's such a beautiful shot of Joe Kennedy's face as she's descending from like the rafters.
Yeah.
There's that great, just like with her red hair and just that dress and just how gorgeous. And what's interesting with Stephen McLean is he did not want Joe Kennedy. He wanted Nell Campbell. Like he wrote this film picturing Nell Campbell. Speaking of Rocky Horror, and that's the thing. Rocky Horror is all up in this movie in a lot of ways. You actually see like the lips, I believe, in Angus's room at one point, like sort of on the wall. And there's so much great like teenager collage art.
Oh yeah.
I love collage art now, and all of that is rooted to like when you're a teenager, it's almost like you're on amphetamine, but instead of actual amphetamine, it's just that teenage hormones.
Yeah.
And it's so you're just collaging. You're like, it's just it made me think of that. But yeah, he wanted little Nell, and some of the songs like Surfside Tango, when she's on top of the I love that little song. It's that one is so Little Nell, and it does sound a lot like a song that she did do called "Do the Swim," which is such a cute little Nell song. And even like Joe Kennedy's kind of voice registers a little unusual, and Nell has that
up a lot too.
Yeah,
like even her speaking at the beginning is much higher than like she definitely even her speaking vocal patterns. She kind of runs an octave,
Totally. But I think the main reason was that Nell was probably kind of like, I hate this term so much, but she probably wasn't like she'd probably get kind of aged out of being able to be that, just because, the character's 18 and this is 82.
That's what I was wondering. Like, it would have been just a hair too, but then the question then becomes like, the story is still similar. You just have to age the characters up. Like
at that time though, you weren't going to break, it's like you would be old, it's like older, you'd be like past the point of being able to break through or something. It's a little different now, but it is strange. Like just a few years, it's like, oh, you would have been, they're looking for an 18-year-old. And I think like Joe Kennedy was 20 at the time. So, she still is a little bit older than the character slightly. I think Ross O'Donovan was 14. I think he was 14 playing 14. But that is wild. I also read that it was a contest, that they did like a casting contest. And that's how they ended up getting Joe Kennedy, which she had only worked in like almost like a singing restaurant or some kind of, like something like this. I forget, like some kind of she was like a punk singer. So I think she had a band, and then she had worked in like some restaurant where not like full dinner theater, but some kind of interesting, something like that. And she ended up kind of winning the part. And if that's not entirely true, I think that's what they put in the Australian at the time. Like that they had they made her like a discovery, which is kind of brilliant to have a movie about someone being discovered who's ambitious. And then it's a contest won by a girl who wants to be discovered and is ambitious.
Oh God, that's brilliant. Either way, like if that's all true, amazing. Even if it's not the hullabaloo, hullabaloo of it is so good.
If it's a publicist idea, fantastic. If it's true, even better.
And she's Right. Like she has such a naturalism about her, but there's also mixed in with her little, like her own little sort of quirky mannerisms. It really does like flesh out this character.
And she kind of has intimacy with everyone. You know, that's the other, it's like, that's kind of inspiring in real life where she just walks. I feel like I lack a sense of hierarchy. And so I do speak to a lot of people just exactly the same. You know, and she kind of has that quality too, where no matter who she's talking to, it's not like she changes who she is. She's like very open and kind of just does have this comfortableness no matter what the situation that she's walking into. Like she just kind of talks to everyone like she knows them and they're her friend.
She's uniquely herself throughout. And that for me is like, that's how that was hard to look away from her performance because it was so good. She was just so herself constantly to a fault. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. Like it makes for compelling entertainment when you have a character that refuses to be anything other than themselves. And I don't know, like her performance, like you mentioned, Heather, it just seems so naturalistic. Like she's just so fucking cute throughout the entire movie is really what it is. Like she's adorable throughout. Like every time she's on screen, she's adorable, but then you get that sense of autonomy. Like she has her own autonomy throughout the entire movie. She is herself. And like there's something about that like she can be so cute and adorable, but also you know that she's not going to take anybody else's bullshit. And she wants to be herself as a success. And you see that scene where they kind of try to make her someone else and how ill-fitting that feels for her. And I love that scene only because she plays it so well. Even though everybody else is cheering and screaming and like praising her for how good she is and how talented she clearly is, she is not having a good time. I am not having a good time here. Like, and again, like it's just that sense of like, I am who I am and I will never be anything else. I really, as someone who feels the same way, I appreciate getting to see those stories being told of like, at the end of the movie, they are still themselves. It's just now they're successful.
Yeah. Well, and like, I keep thinking about this point, Rachel, that you brought up is that like, especially in this time period, but I don't think things have changed that much either. Getting to see a movie where like a woman has complete agency of herself and it's just like, yeah, she's just a person. And it's like, God, like, and it makes me sad because God, that's so rare to see, especially in like a teen movie.
Right.
Like it's
lots of consequences. You know, she has hijinks, you know, it's like they're always up to some hijinks, but it's more like good fun. Like there's not a lot of bad consequences. You know, she's still able to keep propelling herself forward. There's no like, I mean, like you do doubt it. You don't know where she's coming from. And you are like, you're really along for this ride of where she actually goes because you are unfamiliar with what this, you know, this little small town Australian path, like where is it going to go, you know?
Oh my God. And like, okay, so we have to because Chris, I'm trying to remember, you alluded to either really loving this performance or not liking it, but Ross O'Donovan as Angus, I like, that's a performance I love the more I see it.
I love him.
I think he's great.
Oh, okay. Whew, thank goodness. Because you alluded, and it was one of those things where I'm like, wait, does that mean he really likes it? Or Chris is like,
yeah, I think we both misinterpreted it, and he was saying he thinks he's stole the movie.
He kind of did.
He's so good.
Like a goalie. I feel it's like they're co-stars more than you would imagine. Like they're really right up.
Well, he gets an entire arc. I mean, we get to see where he ends up at the end, and it makes logical sense where he ends up. And I don't know, like that character could have been immensely grating, and it probably would have been if it had been cast in the States as an Anthony Michael Hall type. But there's like there's an irreverence to the way that he plays the character that feels real. Like you mentioned, Heather, like he's halfway a shitter kid, but he's the kind of shitter kid that you could get behind because he's the kind of shitter kid that I would want to be, where I'm being a shitter kid because I have a purpose in doing it. There is a goal in mind. It's not just to be a little asshole and break someone's windows on their house or on their car. Like, yes, I'm being an asshole to this radio shock jockey or TV shock jockey, but like I'm doing it because I'm trying to further my own professional career and my cousin's professional career. It's not just because I'm trying to get my yucks like a Bart Simpson type. Like, it's not that. Like, And there is a time and a place for that. And I'm not saying that that's not also an interesting character, but it's a lot less of a nuanced character, that's for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And his like, in his musical, because he even gets his own musical number.
Yes.
And this is one of my favorite songs on the entire soundtrack, because it's like, is that what's in a house? And it's like, but who has it? Like, I know, like, even not as a teenager, as somebody who, like, anybody that's lived in a tiny apartment where you're surrounded by, like, your privacy, not that great because the walls are thin or whatever. It's like, yes, like, I love the song. I've related to this song on so many levels in my life. And he's like, I was kind of shocked to see that, like, he did a few more films, but I guess, and at first I was bummed. I'm like, man, he should have had a bigger career. But then it's like, oh yeah, he's a big human rights activist and does like work for like indigenous rights in Australia, which that's unfortunately something Australia does have in common with the States.
But even changing, I feel like, I mean, I don't know enough to be able to say the exact time period, but I feel like that's a huge part of waves of change in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But so yeah, Ross O'Donovan, badass. Like, what a cool dude, and what a great, and you're right, because God, teenage boy performances, like kid performances in movies, I'm already on the fence. You're already maybe gonna lose me typically, because I'm like, oh God. And then, but yeah, the like teenage boy, no, he's great. And it's such a like, and especially because he really was 14, like Angus has this sort of like world weariness that you kind of see with kids that, like, because that's the thing, his dad shows up for like a hot minute, barely engages with his son, he engages him long enough to steal some money from him, and then bails on him again. His mother's completely absent. Like, yeah, so he has this sort of like, sometimes people are like, oh, this kid's an old soul. And it's like, well, yeah, because nobody really, like, because he's been just ferreted around. Like, he had to become an old soul just to count. And he has that. He carries himself like a kid who's been through that. Like, it's, it's such a smart performance. And also, I love a lot of his fashion in this too. I definitely want to dress more like Jackie. God, that cape. Like that sort of fish scale cape she's wearing, you mentioned earlier when she's doing the tightrope, is gorgeous.
Oh, but she has that bright yellow harness that at the time I was just like, I mean, I would love to have something like that made now. But even then, I'm like, what would have been the circumstance that this bright yellow like bondage harness? Like truly, how would it have been from a punk store? Would it have been from a fetish store? Did they have it made? Like, it's really fascinating to me because it's such a unique piece for, like,
oh, totally.
Talking about? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Trying to
that outfit. It's the kind of like pillowy nude suit she has. This.
Okay, yes,
yeah. Like, it's super cool. I mean, the costumes are just kind of can't be beat. And I was definitely that type of kid where I would buy the 50s crinoline dresses and then pull the crinoline out and like safety pin it and wear it with t-shirts and stuff, like wear it as a sport.
Awesome.
And I feel like, I mean, it's probably from watching people, things like that. And so great. I think, what was I going to say about Angus? Oh, so do you guys know the show You Can't Do That on Television?
Oh my God. That was my ride or die as a little kid.
This is the other thing is that he reminds me of Alistair. I feel like he's like Alistair on You Can't Do That on Television. And I love that. It's like those are like a weird parallel. I mean, completely different, yet there's something that they seem the same to me in that I have like a natural draw to just that type of, it's like kind of troublemaker,
But you like them? It's not,
it's like very alike, I think. I mean, I haven't done a side by side on the photos, but like just thinking of them, like I know they remind me of each other. And he seems really punk, like he seems really English punk, and she's driving around on scooters. Like you know what I mean? Like I do feel like they express more so than even how music sounds or the types of clubs that they're playing or whatever. It's like I think because they are like lower class and we're working class, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you have to kind of like, she's kind of raising him because he does have that crappy dad. You know, their friendship is from because obviously she was like, just let him tag along because he needed somebody. And so then they kind of showed up for each other. Because even isn't it her? It's not her. She was like her aunt and uncle or something, doesn't she? I think they're both kind of like these abandoned kids who just decided, like, even more so. I think that's more, that reminds me of like the States, how she was so young and she just leaves. You know, her mom dies and she just leaves because she's like, all right, I'm going to start living life. So I feel like they're 14 and 18, but they're just like, it's time to get out of here because, you know, it's like we've worn out our welcome in whatever this home situation is. Like, we're just going to go be famous and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. And the dynamic. Yeah. Cause it's like, I think Aunt Pearl is her mom, but her dad is nowhere. And Pearl is has such an odd dynamic with Jackie that it's almost like at times, like there's been times where I'm like, is she the aunt? Is she the aunt to both?
Right. Yeah, no, that's what I think. I think that might be, I know it is weird to figure out. I think a lot of the relationships, even with the tavern or whatever, you know, the bar, I think it was really hard to figure out, but I love that that essentially they just come together and they all want her to be a success.
There's one guy in particular that we see in almost every tavern scene. He's like the big burly kind of middle-aged guy. And at one point when she's like she's like doing the tightrope walking in the diner. And he's like, nice legs. And Pearl something like, yeah, they go all the way up to her bum, but that's not on the menus. But he being like such a badass and like, you know, like he breaks up a fight. Yeah. And like at the end, he's like, that's our girl or something. Like he's like so sweet. And I just
so much natural dancing, which that was something else that I read that apparently while they were waiting for maybe like the money to come through or something. Like I think that they were kind of rehearsing these scenes. It took a while before they were actually filming, and it really was people that hung out at that bar, I think too, where it was like neighborhood people and they did kind of they either knew each other or then bonded kind of in these rehearsals or waiting to start filming that when you see them interacting and they just kind of start naturally dancing and all this stuff, it's like, they're authentic.
I love that. It looks and feels so authentic. And also, I don't know the origin of this. Maybe you guys can help me. But I've noticed in watching films from Australia and the UK, the Christmas tradition seems to involve paper hats.
Yeah, in the
Christmas crackers.
From the Christmas crackers, yeah.
Can we have that in the States? Because I want to dress like the Pope.
You can get Christmas crackers. They have them for sure. I mean, they're probably at I'm not even sure what stores would be
Home Goods
or not. Yeah, there you go. Home Goods.
I saw them at Home Goods last week.
World Market, which I don't even know if World Market still exists.
Yeah, it does. I actually the reason I know it's the last time I went to Independence, Missouri with my family to go see some wrestling, which is amazing. We drove by and my mom was like, World Market, what's that? And we went in. So I've been to a World Market. I was more excited about half price books though. But
hey, now you're speaking my language.
Oh yeah. I got
Dallas's own half price books.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's a half price books in Dallas that is the size of a Sam's Club. That is the flag. That is the
crying that I didn't go.
Oh shit! Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. It's on the Northwest Highway off of 75 in Dallas, and it is the size of a Sam's Club. It is fucking amazing.
I had to drive right to Boston the next morning.
I wanted to ask y'all about. There's an interesting bit of interaction between her mom and Angus's father.
Yes.
Is he trying to get with her mom?
I think he banged. I shouldn't say banged. Sorry, I feel like they did. I'm sorry. I feel like they made.
Wait a sec.
I feel like they made love, but she introduces it when they get out of the cab. And this is again something I noticed more in a recent viewing that I did in my past. And I've seen this movie several times over the years. But so this is my brother-in-law. So if Angus is the cousin.
Right.
To Jackie. So is his dad.
His sister or something was his mom.
Yeah. So I don't think it's truly incestuous.
But it's weird.
Well, but it's weird. Then Jackie specifically even says do you think the timing's weird of your father showing up with what, it's and also I want to point out that when they have that scene that she actually sleeps in an inflatable baby pool. That's how far they took it.
Yeah.
She curls up in a row. That's her bed, the rounded, playful baby pool. She's so, so it's like some of these things I have to say. Some of the things are so quirky that they're almost cringy to me, but I do like them as a detail. And I'm kind of glad they went over the top with them because honestly, it's not even all that. Like,
Yeah. It's a unconventional romance not often seen in cinema.
Oh, you're talking about the
yeah, it's just kind of
brother-in-law.
Yeah,
he's such a lounge.
Well, but then
Yeah.
money. It's like he's looking for money. So I think you get the impression that he's just a dirty dog, and
Right.
it's like there might be something romantic going on between their parents or whatever. But really, he's just trying to shake them down for money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a real piece of
So
shit.
he's probably kissing ass. It's like he comes in and he charms in whichever way that he can so that he can get money to leave again. So,
Yeah. It's like, God, poor Angus. Like, I'm so glad that he's got Jackie and,
Right.
the Nada. Like, what name's talking about Nada? I love Nada. The older woman who has psychic powers, and he gives her the most amazing Christmas gift of a crystal ball in a fortune teller shawl. Is that at Home Goods? Do they have that at Home Goods?
I wish.
I might have to make that for you.
I hold that for the clown.
Nobody knows it.
Oh yeah, nobody knows. If this makes somebody's like, what are they talking about? I'm just gonna say nothing. We're talking about Starstruck. You heard nothing. Also, a character I really love, and especially because I feel like in a more traditional movie, he would have been the main villain, and instead they go for more of a just sort of like, yeah, this guy's a person, and that is Terry, played by John O'May, who's like the big popular TV show host. Of course, Jackie has a huge crush on him, and he's just like, looks kind of like Shadow Stevens. Just if you remember, he's Shadow Stevens adjacent. What I love his performance. He's really likable, and he never. Again, a Hollywood movie either would have made him totally sleaze on Jack and
Empire Records style.
Right. I have a confession. I only watched the first 5 minutes of that movie years ago, and I stopped. I couldn't do it. Some movies just, it's like love. It either connects with you or it doesn't.
Father Malone's not a huge fan of that movie either.
See?
I get it. I mean, I get it. It's a movie that has its
love it. I'm not.
It has its detractors and it has its fans. I totally get it. It's not for everybody. Frankly, it kind of makes itself not for everybody in a lot of ways.
But yeah, it just wasn't weird enough. I think that's the thing whenever cult movies are cult movies for normies. I shouldn't say normies.
We're gatekeeping over here. Welcome normies with your normal cult movies. What's a normie cult movie? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson's a normie cult movie director. How's that?
Oh, yeah, that is a fucking good answer. That is like the answer of answers.
And again, I'm not shaming anybody that likes it. Like, because you know what?
Say Tarantino.
We won't go.
Is that not as fair as
no? Because I'm in a good mood. I'm like jubilant about Starstruck. I want to talk about gross foot man. That's like fucking, with his bro Eli Roth talking about, who probably never even has a woman on the crew. That whatever. I'm in a good headspace.
The clip of P.T. Anderson and Quentin Tarantino talking and Fiona Apple literally dissociating from her body will never not be funny. I don't know if you've ever seen that clip, but it's her sitting there listening to them talk. And she's just like...
that boy, if anybody's talking about like, do you ever want to do cocaine again? And then you're in the room with Tarantino. So the answer is no. That is a walking anti-drug PS. Allegedly. But, like Empire Records to me, like I know a ton of people that love it, but I think like a lot of people wouldn't consider that like a huge mainstream massive success, like Grease or whatever. But a lot of the people that I know it are people that are super into cult movies. Does that make sense? But it's like, maybe this is kind of also a little bit like a SAT question, but I know some people that are into cult movies that do like it. I don't know. Like what you like. Don't be a dick. I've not watched it either, Heather. I've not watched it. You're good. I mean, thing is, like, I was a teenager when that came out, so I probably was the demographic, and I felt so alienated from the whole, like, this is the alternative kid, because I'm like, no, I was a real weird kid. Like, I wasn't like cool weird. I was weird. And I was like, that shit didn't connect with me. I'm like, this is, wow. Oh, look, you get to be, I don't like Liv Tyler, now, but it's like women were not given any more autonomy than they were in the 80s or 70s. It's just like, oh, we'll put her at a different time,
Right.
Except at least like women from like the past movies. Like, one of the reasons, not to get too in the weeds, I got into like cult cinema at a young age is that you had more of a chance of seeing like strong female actresses and role models. And some that were very much like not a normal cookie cutter. Like Susan Tyrrell's my goddess, look at Tura Santana, Pam Grier, like, and
that's just the impression of Empire Records that it's almost like a parody of subculture characters.
Yeah.
They're very stereotypes.
Yeah.
Which again, like I get, like I think for me it was like kind of like with Starstruck, not to compare the movies, but more like the timing. Like I saw it at the right time. Like I saw it at the right time. I saw it in the right headspace, and it resonated with me. And it hasn't unresonated. And there may come a time where it's like, and now I don't like this anymore. But
there's generational things too.
Right.
I mean,
oh yeah,
because it really is just like when you see it when you're a kid, or and it just has a different impression because you don't have all of the baggage that we do. Like, I'm significantly older than Heather too, so he knows a lot of my cultural touchstones, and a lot of them better than I do. But a lot of them are things I was exposed to as a kid, where I didn't necessarily even have like an adult perspective on them. I just had exposure, which has made me who I am. But it's, I definitely understand. I'm not here to criticize anyone who's younger because they don't appreciate the things I shouldn't have seen in the 70s. And instead they like the things that came out in 2000 or whatever. It's like we all have our own, we find things in our own time. We have things that happen at the age that we are. And then we have things that find out around. And I think obviously if you're into movies and you're into music and you're into whatever, it's like there's going to be overlap there. You're going to find your people regardless of the age,
Absolutely.
With the internet, because then it's not as, we all kind of have the same, it's an even playing field of being able to find things that interest us. So, and there's going to be of all ages that also have those interests.
I love that. And I agree. And I think that's kind of, to me, that's one of the things I love about getting to do shows like this is that chance of somebody who's, who didn't, has never maybe even heard of this movie, but they're curious because, it's shit. Maybe something like Empire Records. I mean, sometimes gateways come in, packages that you don't always see. Like, it's like, wow, there's like generations of people that are now into Kate Bush because of Stranger Things. And
which is fucking insane.
It's insane. And I saw a few people when they came out being actual gatekeepers. And I'm like, you know what? I don't give a shit how they found it. It's like, wow, yeah, I love Kate Bush too. And yeah, I've been listening to her music since, I was a teenager, and trust me, nobody in Arkansas listened to Kate Bush in the fucking 90s. Okay. If they did, that was a teenager, at least. They were like, I later on found like one or two weird adults that were much older that were super fucking cool. And I was like, oh, thank God, including my late friend Bob, who also got me into Shriekback. I miss Bob. But yeah, I mean, it's, that's the neat thing about culture discussion and having things like podcasts and, and blogs and even social media. I mean, as long as the word's getting out, I think there's always going to be people that are like curious. And I mean, it's crazy because like I'll see like on YouTube comments, like something that came out in the 80s, like some obscure synthwave kind of video from like Germany or something. And there'll be like somebody like, oh man, I wish I was born in the 80s, and which is so sweet, even though I kind of want to take them aside and be like, oh, honey, the 80s sucks, just like any other decade, it's just, there's always great culture.
Sucks.
Well, no, I'm saying Reagan's.
No, but I mean, but if every decade has sucked, then the human experience.
There are a few things that make me happier than anti-Reagan sentiment.
Oh my God.
I feel very anti-Reagan punk is like will always have a place in my heart because I feel like wow, it was dark. It was a dark time. Most nostalgia that gets portrayed currently, like in the last couple of decades regarding the 80s, like it doesn't show it, it wasn't all just like, new wave dancing to certain songs or whatever. It's like, there's a very narrow recollection of what culture in the 80s, youth culture was like in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, and that's why it cuts. No, I don't mean to be.
I loved it
of course
for
not.
on, but
Yeah. But no, I mean, my same what I say every decade is that because, and Rachel, you just nailed this perfectly. Nostalgia clouds reality.
Correct.
And that could be nostalgia for a decade. It could be even nostalgia for like, oh, like there are people that are like, oh, I loved being in school. And they don't, which I don't trust those people for the fucking record. Anybody that's like, oh, I loved being in school. I'm like, get away from me because we are going to have nothing in common. I don't wish you ill, but I wish you away. Okay. But it's dangerous. There's nothing wrong with having affection. Affection and nostalgia to me are two very different things. Like nostalgia is something that blinds people to where they're like, oh, things were simpler then. And it's like, that's a dangerous statement, as I think we all, learned. I mean, actually a few years ago, I did an article in a response, kind of not direct, but because about like nuclear war and images and messages about nuclear war and 1980s music videos. And part of the reason I did that is because like rather after the 2016 election, I kept having people in my life they weren't intentionally trying to gaslight me, but I was like, I would make a joke like, God, I thought the 80s were over. And they were like, oh, there wasn't any Cold War in the 80s. There wasn't nuclear war fear in the 80s. And I'm like, what? Are you fucking with me? Are you fucking? Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take stuff that was played on MTV, arguably in some of its height as a music video network. And cause I was like, I remember the 80s. I was a kid, but I'm like, come on. Like, of course there was, nuclear fear was everywhere. We had fucking break.
No, it was terrible. I mean, when I was in grade school, it was the end of the Cold War, but it was very much, in Illinois, they had told, like, at one point, they told us where the 13 nuclear power plants were in Illinois, and they said there were missiles aimed directly at them. So no matter what, we would be instantly dead if Russia attacked us. This is like what they told me in third grade or something, like we would learn, it was very like that. I feel like a lot of my young anxiety was based on it being the later days, whatever it is, of the Cold War. It was brutal. Being a child and being like, oh, they're just going to blow up the whole world. Like it's,
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask y'all if y'all, speaking of the internet and frankly, shockingly, randomly, ironically, nuclear war. So there is a Starstruck fan website, starstruck1982.weebly.com.
Yes.
And they have a trivia section. And there are 3 fan theories regarding the film.
Fantastic.
Oh, wow.
2 of them we'll get to, but the third one stuck out to me. And it seems like less of a fan theory. I don't know how to perceive it, but I want to run it by y'all because y'all have seen this movie more times than I have. And y'all also, again, just to share this because it seems interesting and it has to do with nuclear war. Early on in the movie, she says, with my luck, I'll crack it and then some nuclear holocaust will come along and ruin my career. So Jackie says early on in the movie. At the end of the movie, there is a sound of a bomb dropping and an explosion sound at the end of the film as well, to the point where there is a subtitle for it as the movie fades to black. I don't. The fan theory in question is: does the film end with the nuclear holocaust? 3 question marks.
This is how Mad Max happens.
It's for real. I've never paid attention. I mean, maybe I heard the sound. I've never consciously put that together. I love it. I think that nothing would be more 1982 than that.
Oh my God. The same, because same year the day after it came out. Was that 82? Like that in Threads? What am I? I may be off a year or two. But this is the same era.
82, 83, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found it to be like, that's pretty punk. It's pretty punk of the fucking movie. Like, I mean, the character acknowledging it is one thing, but then like literally, because I went and rewatched it and like you can hear like the
yeah, you do. Oh my God.
And then there is like sound of
only thing that
explosion
could've
at the
stopped her.
end.
Wouldn't that have been the only thing that could have stopped her? The way she was just propelled forward by her own ambition. That's really interesting. I mean, that seems like that's probably what happened.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy because like
Dark joke, you know.
I didn't catch it either until I went and read the fan website. So kudos to them for catching it. The other two is Angus really Jackie's brother, and is Strictly Ballroom an unofficial sequel to Starstruck?
I don't know Strictly Ballroom.
I've never seen it. I've heard of it. I've never seen it. Now I kind of want to see it.
Yeah, apparently it's the set design of her room and the character in Strictly Ballroom's room as well. So I don't know. I mean, hey, this movie has a fan website.
So brother, I mean, that's probably them trying to make that conclusion if they were having an affair that, you know, that was happening as
yeah.
But I don't think so.
No.
I like that type of speculation though, but I don't think so. But I bet they really were implying. I feel like a nuclear bomb was a popular ending at a certain time. You know what I mean? It's like, just mushroom end it all because it was constantly hanging over your head for decades.
Yeah. My favorite zombie movie ends that way. Return of the Living Dead sure goes out on a fucking high note. It goes on the highest of high notes.
Just saw that at Level Drive-In too.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so weird because I was laughing. I've told this story 20 times, but I took, years ago, I did a personality test to see which character from that movie I was, and it was Suicide, who's like the really humorless punk that's like, you guys think this is a fucking costume? It's a way of life. And I'm like, but there is a part of me that is 100% like that. Like, I know myself well enough to know my own shit. And I'm totally like, oh, Suicide, you're so spooky. Hey, fuck you guys. Like, what? I'm like, it's me. But no, that's true. But they get Forbidden Zone. It's with the giant explosion, like a bomb. There's also a great Johnny Thunders. I'm trying to think what album. This where he talks about this will be off my upcoming album. That is if there is a new album, and the bomb. There's something about the bomb. That's the way Johnny Thunder says the bomb.
I mean, that makes this movie quintessentially 80s, right? Like that ending is just, I don't know. Like when I think of things in the 80s and like a certain level of nihilism surrounding feelings on nuclear war, it's like, well, if it fucking happens, it fucking happens, and there will be zero we could do about it other than experience it all together. Like the fact that this movie just goes, if that is what it is, which again the movies kind of would lead me to believe, at least it's kind of tongue in cheek, like if anything, it's at least re-acknowledging, it's re-acknowledging the fact that they brought it up and she says it. But yeah, what a fucking 80s way to go out.
Oh my God. I never
early 80s too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, think about like 1982, that's Cafe Flesh. And that's set basically in a dystopian universe, that's post World War III, post, more atomic damage.
I mean, nutsiness is thinking that anything would survive. Like, bless everyone who made art that was like what happens after, because I think essentially, and in a weird reverse psychology way, maybe it made people think that there was hope to live beyond the bomb, like dark dystopian films. It's like, we really did think that would just be it, that it's just like, they can tell us to fold our arms over our heads and sit cross-legged under our desk, but we were going to be obliterated if there was actually a bomb, and then to show these, it's like, oh, well, maybe a few people like human cockroaches actually survive. And then what?
Oh gosh. I didn't want the whole like
Strictly Ballroom. That's what.
Yeah. Russ Donovan and Joe Kennedy coming out from underneath the rubble, looking around, standing and looking at the mushroom cloud in the distance. Yeah, that'd be something.
Wow.
Cast the movie in a real weird pallor at the end there. Just like, what the fuck?
I mean, they're both still with us. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm not a big fan of sequels. Well, that's not true. It depends on the
actually
sequel,
I wonder if we see the Weebly too, but I'm actually seeing that Jeffrey Rush was a bit player in this movie that I never realized.
He's one of the
manager of the Wow.
He's like behind the camera trying to get her to like look at camera 2 or 3. Because there was like a long, skinny dude. I kept thinking like, man, this guy looks like Jeffrey Rush. And then it's like, oh shit, it is Jeffrey Rush.
You both mentioned Australian, cinema, and obviously I think Australian actors also. The other thing about like Australian cinema kind of not dwindling off, but it's just not as present as it used to be. So many Australian actors can work in the States as seemingly American actors because for whatever reason, the Australian accent does a really good American accent, like almost hard to suss out that you're not like, I was floored when I found out Toni Collette was Australian.
Oh, wow. See, I don't know. Well, but that's the
I
thing.
saw her in Australian films, I think, probably first. So
yeah, I did. Like the first thing I saw was Muriel's Wedding. So yeah. But that's an age thing too. Like when you were a little person, you probably saw her in like what, The Sixth Sense? Was she in?
I saw her in the United States of Terra first.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Or like a Chris Hemsworth, or even like a Nicole Kidman, like just or Russell Crowe.
Actors now too. I forget, but I feel like there's a lot of people that you find out they're Australian or they're English, and they do such great American act. Like Succession was filled with actors that I think were English or Australian, and you just would never know. Or maybe you hear it slightly on a certain word, but you're dealing with like the super rich who have affected accents and private school accents and all, studying abroad. So you don't even think about it twice if it's just on a word here or there, But yeah, there's definitely a lot of modern actors that are from Australia and the UK that you just wouldn't have a clue until you find out.
Hugh Laurie.
Paul, yeah. What was Young Einstein? What was Yahoo Serious?
Yahoo Serious. Also, do want to thank you, Heather, for mentioning Men at Work, a thing that I am a huge fan of.
I love Men at Work. Oh my god,
yeah,
I really like tremendous.
Well, and I should say, actually, the bands that are involved in the soundtrack are actually from New Zealand. So,
right.
But aside from that, we're talking about Australian bands. I don't want to do. I feel like they get mixed up so easily, especially by me and Americans.
Oh my god, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get all the it's like when you tell somebody that's from Jersey, it's like, oh, so you're from New York, right? And then like a knife comes out, and it's like, oh damn, I'm sorry, dude.
Wasn't intentional. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah. Or yeah. That's I think it's okay. We mentioned actually, I know what part you're talking, and you said New Zealand and Australia, and that is correct statement because some of the band, like Mental as Anything, is on the soundtrack, and they're Australian. Down Boots, I believe.
It's Split Ends and
the Swingers are definitely Kiwis.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, because they did a music video.
They had been recording in Australia, and so that's when they did that soundtrack stuff. Like they worked whoever the musical director was, and they kind of did all that stuff that was, I guess, was Starstruck.
Yeah,
but I always keep a tab saved on my computer for the how to move to New Zealand instructions because it's one of the easiest countries in the world. It's one of the simplest to be able to move. So I always keep that as it's like a parachute. So it's an ejection hatch for me to be like, okay, time to get serious and fill out my paperwork and move to New Zealand.
God, New Zealand, I would love to. It's a beautiful country. Like they banned assault weapons.
Yeah,
they sure did.
Yeah, so I know there's a goth, this amazing goth girl named Freya I follow on YouTube that lives there. I mean, I'm down. That's they got birds. They got cool birds. I mean, see, I guess I don't know. The Swingers. I do want to say real quick before we wrap it up. There is a music video for One Good Reason. That is amazing. And it's on YouTube. I highly recommend it. Phil, and Rachel, my brain it's Phil Judd.
Judd,
right?
yes.
Yeah. Cause I almost said Phil Rudd and that's a different musician.
Phil Judd with 2D.
Phil Judd has such a great presence. And in the music video, we see him heading to a very seedy motel with this much older woman. And the look he gives the camera, like the smile, is it warms my heart. It's sort of like somebody, like, imagine like if your recently divorced mom she's living her new cougar period. And like the kid, like,
real. It's my childhood.
This is, yeah. And like some kid that's like 2 years older than you, that's way cooler than you. And you always kind of hated him because he was in a band. It's like, oh man, he can play guitar. That guy's fuck him. And it's like, oh yeah, he's dating your mom now. And he's like turning around to look at you like, I'm going to wreck that. Like I'm totally, it's that look. He gives that look in the video and it is glorious. And it's a great song.
And also as far as videos, the split ends version of Body and Soul, which is She Got Body, She Got Soul. There is a video on YouTube that's a performance from an Australian music TV show. And it's phenomenal. It's really,
oh my God.
really fun. So, and maybe, I mean, I think I have posted in the past, but I have a quick thing that I would like to say too since we have gone so far off, but what Joe Kennedy is doing today. Have you guys looked this up? Have you looked into this at all?
I did a tiny bit, but not nearly the amount I should. I did say that she directed and acted in a short called Vampire. Could I be more of a cliche, by the way? I swear, I might as well be smoking cloves and like Miss Goth girl over.
Whatever get you through the night.
Yeah,
I will say that the thing that distracted me is I'm going to be my own cliche because she had founded this organization called Focusing Australia, where she developed this it's like this body where it's like a healing type of thing where it says body-oriented process of self-awareness and emotional healing. And it's been going on for a long time. So there's a thing called focusing, which is one of it. And then there's something that's called somatic experiencing. So it's a lot of it is based on the trauma that gets stored in your body. And it's like a meditative practice that helps people, get through PTSD and all of this stuff. So that's what she does. And I now can't think of it. Ross O'Donovan. There was a quote more recently from him where he was saying she was always even at 20, she was like a very spiritual person and leaned towards that direction. So it's super interesting to me that she has this center Focusing Australia. That's just like this spiritual healing practice.
Man, that is so beautiful.
Good for her.
I love her.
I want to look at
seriously.
I want to study with Joe Kennedy.
Oh my God.
Australia.
In fact, if there's anybody that wants to sponsor the three of us we could relocate the podcast to Australia.
Relocate entirely to Australia?
Yes. I know it won't be cheap, but I promise you the three of us, we're worth it.
It is not cheap is the definite, that's the pure statement right there. Good.
It's not cheap if we're shipping ourselves to Australia, it's going to be really expensive.
Even more expensive. The cheapest way to get there is in a box of our own creation. Yeah. Heather, I guess Heather and Rachel, starting again, whichever one of you wants to go first. Final thoughts on Starstruck.
I love it. I mean, it's such a classic. I love that I have such attachment to the soundtrack and I got to kind of experience that. Like as a record, it's such a cool thing that I've had in my life, and then I get to know the movie even better and see that it's so of my life. I feel like other people would see this movie and be like, I bet Rachel likes this movie, And so yeah, I hope that more people see it and enjoy it, and I like it as an alternative to what was being offered up along the same lines in the U.S. So I think it has tremendous value. That
Heather.
Amen. I also clearly I love it. I just think it's a fun movie. I think it adds, especially like if you're somebody who is, like, kind of alluded to this earlier, if you're having just like a shitty time handling, there's a lot in the world. There always is, same as it always, same as it ever was, to quote David Byrne, but with human history. But sometimes you just need to watch something that kind of reminds you, magic is still out there. And, and this movie's a great way to do that. Cinematography is gorgeous. The art design, the music's great. The cast is so charming. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. And I would love to see more people talk about it because I think it's a gem that should be discovered by more people. And it's way better than Grease. Come on. Too many people know about Grease. Grease has had its day. It's fine. It's whatever. Come to Starstruck.
I also like to point out that Grease is just mildly problematic with what I think the message of the movie is, which is it's okay to change for your partner. If not, you have to.
Oh, don't even get me started on that movie. Don't even. We'll be here another fucking hour.
Completely change everything about yourself. It's true.
Yeah, I hate that movie. I hate Grease, for the record. but for a lot of reasons. But yeah, that's one of them. But
it's weird to me how popular a movie like that is all I'm saying.
I still like an aspirin in my coat.
Is that fair? I still like the opening song. I think Frankie Valli's opening song is pretty great. Like,
I love Starker Channing and Jeff Conaway in that movie.
yeah, but you just like those actors. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
that's like damning with faint praise. If I've ever, I like them and everything else.
Well, they're great in those roles.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like they were always going to be great in those roles, especially those two. I'm with y'all. I enjoyed this movie a lot. Thank you so much, both of you, for bringing it to my attention, to wanting to share it with me in a public forum. Because, like you both have mentioned, this is not covered enough on the fan website. They have a link to the. Maybe one of the only other times, if not the only other time, it's been covered by a podcast. That podcast was called "A Dingo Ate My Movie Podcast," which is fucking.
Oh my!
Here I am with the title that I've got. I mean, I can't say that it's less creative than mine, but it's definitely more specifically creative. That's a great title for a podcast. Essentially, all about Australian movies as well. So I don't have to start that podcast. Somebody else already did it. So. There's a link to them. So they covered it about 2 years. This is fun. I had a good time with it, and I do have some of the songs stuck in my head already. So that for me is the sign of a quality musical. If I can listen to the things outside of the sphere of it and still enjoy them. And yes, a lot of the music is really fun, and the performances are fun, and it lacks that weird saccharine gloss that so much of the 80s stuff in this country was just so replete with. Just so much just fake sentiment and saccharine and just, no thanks, I'm good. This movie is uniquely its own thing, to the point where maybe it ends with the characters all getting turned into nuclear monsters. So, do I think that's what happened? No, but it's pretty punk rock of the movie to even suggest it could end that way. So yeah, no, this was fun. This was a lot of fun. Thank you both for bringing it to the show. So, Rachel, I will give you the opportunity once again if you'd like to plug any of your collected works, where you can be found, if you want to be found, and anything like that. So
I'll just say Instagram. It's at Rach__McP MCP. Rach McP __ in between for no good reason. But that's pretty much probably where I'm the most active. And I'm just working on a book. So there's not, other than some podcasts here and there, there's not a lot popping up.
Heather?
I love how I just working on a fucking book. Hello.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You can find
not even sleep is popping up at this point.
Fair.
You can find me at my website, mondoheather.com. You can also go to my linktree.com / Mondo Heather. And there you'll find my Patreon, my other podcasts I've been on. Of course, I am one of the hosts of Noise Junkies, along with Father Malone and HP, which is also part of the Weirding Way media. And, various articles and all kinds of cultural sundries.
And as for me, the spiel, culturecast.com, Weirding Way Media, Patreon, all the good things that you can do to support the show financially. And then like, rate, and review the show wherever you get it, more than likely iTunes at this point, because that's the only place you can rate podcasts. So if you want to rate the show, do it there. Rachel, Heather, both, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much. Great meeting you, Chris.
Likewise. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.